So this lecture is our part 2 of the measuring the size of the economy, GDP. So in the last lecture we learned that GDP can be measured in three different ways. First is the demand side, which we discussed in detail, and in the demand side, if you remember, GDP is equal to C plus I plus G plus NX, that we covered it. Then GDP can also be measured from the supply side, and GDP can also be measured from the national income approach. So we are going to cover the supply side and the national income approach in this particular lecture. So let's first look at GDP measured by what is produced, that is supply side. Now everything that you purchase, that you consume, needs to be produced, right? And we measure GDP from the purchase or the consumption side in the last lecture. So GDP can also be measured by what is produced, and in economics or in macroeconomics we divide what is produced into 5 broad categories. First are durable goods. These are long lasting goods like car or a refrigerator, which you typically use, and generally rule of thumb is goods which are used for more than 3 years are durable goods. Then there are non-durable goods. These are short-lived goods like food and clothing. The burger that you eat, the meat you eat, or the soft drinks, beverages, or these are the non-durable goods. Then there are services. These are products which are intangible, such as entertainment, healthcare, education. For example, this class is a service that you are buying, and I am the one who is producing this service through Siena College. And then there are structures. These are the buildings used as residences, factory, office building, retail store, or for other purposes. And finally, there are change in inventories. These are change in good that has been produced but not yet been sold. So you can imagine these are goods which are lying in factories or in stores which are yet to be sold. So these are part of the change in inventory, because these are also significant part of the economy. So let's look at the data. So what data? This table provides components of GDP on the supply side, and mind you, all these numbers are in trillions. So previously we dealt with billions, now it's in trillions. So durable goods consider about $3 trillion worth of goods. Non-durable goods in 2016 were about 2.5 trillion. Services 11.6 trillion, structures 1.5 trillion, and change in inventories close to zero, because these are negligible. And these are shares of each of these components. Now you can see the services constitute almost 62% of the GDP. That's almost 1/2 are services, and rest are followed by durable goods, non-durable goods, structures, and change in inventories. So if you add those things up, these goods like durable goods, non-durable goods, services, structures, and change in inventories, what you get is GDP from the supply side. So let's move on. Let's move on into the other ways to measure GDP. The third way to measure GDP is the income approach. Now mind you, like whenever you are buying for consumption, you have to pay for it, right? And think about from where that money for payment comes. It comes through your income. So another way to measure GDP is just to add up your incomes. And in economics, there are 4 different kinds of income, which is wages earned by the labor or workers, interest, that's your earning on capital, that's rent, that's earning on land and structures, and finally profit. These are your residual incomes. Why profit is a residual income? Is typically what's left over after paying for land, labor, and capital is the entrepreneur's profit. So if you add up wages, interest, rent, and profit, you get GDP from the income side. And this is why the term GDP and national income are sometimes used interchangeably, because GDP is also a measure of income of a country, which also can be measured from the consumption side, also from the supply side, and that's why it's also called the national income. Now, we just got done with like 3 ways of measuring GDP. Now I'm going to focus on few of the issues with measuring GDP. And first problem is the problem of double counting. Remember, the definition of GDP is the output of the value of final goods and services produced in a country in a given year. Now, GDP only includes final goods and services. And what are final goods and services? These are output used directly for consumption, investment, government, and trade purposes. However, GDP does not include or do not include intermediate goods. And what are intermediate goods? These are the goods or output provided to other businesses at an intermediate stage of production, not for final users. For example, meat used in McDonald's burger is an example of intermediate good. Value of meat is already included in the burger. So the value of the burger be included in GDP and not the value of meat separately. Because if you include value of meat separately while accounting for the value of burger, you are double counting the value of meat. Same is true, for example, suppose if you are buying a brand new car and all the cars come with the brand new tires. Now you should not be including the value of those tires separately, because the value of those tires are already included in the value of the car. So intermediate goods should not be included in GDP, because if you include intermediate good, that leads to the problem of double counting. And that's why it's important that intermediate goods should be left aside from the calculation of GDP. There are other things that also not included in GDP. GDP do not include transfer payments. What are transfer payments? These are one-way payments to a person for which no money, good, or services is given or exchanged. Example, food stamps, social security payment, etc. GDP also do not include illegal goods, so such as drugs, right? So if drugs are illegal in most of the United States, and if somebody is selling drugs, and income from that selling drugs is not part of GDP. Same is true of marijuana. Marijuana is a great example because in some states marijuana is legal. So if it is legal, it is part of GDP. Where in some parts of the country marijuana is not legal. In that case, sale of marijuana or income from marijuana is not part of GDP. Also, GDP do not include home production. These are productions which is done at home. For example, you are fixing your own car or cooking your own dinner, or free babysitting service that you are providing maybe to your relatives. Since you are not getting paid for these services, so these are not part of the GDP.